You're now listening to All Hog Sports, covering all Arkansas Razorback sports, such as football, basketball, baseball, and much more. Now, here's your host for today's show, Sam Stimpson.
Now, I haven't covered too much of basketball the last few weeks, but obviously with the football regular season done with, there's a ton to talk about. So I'll be talking about the men and women's team. Now the men's team is 6-0 and is first in the SEC. Women's team is also first in the SEC at 7-1. Very impressive stuff from both of those squads. But if you like what you're hearing on today's podcast, make sure to follow me on Twitter at AllHogSportsPod. Same handle on Instagram and Facebook as well. And please leave a 5-star review on the podcast. That'd mean a ton to me. Help me grow this podcast. I've been enjoying it a ton, and it's really awesome to see all my listeners interact with me on Twitter and stuff. I really appreciate that from everybody. But that being said, kicking it off with the men's basketball team. Now, the last few games, they all have wins. I obviously covered a little bit before the season, but I haven't covered these games, and that was against UT Arlington, which they won 72-60, and I know that's only a 12-point win, but at the end of the game, we went scoreless for a pretty long piece of time because we were basically trying to work on scripted plays and things like that and not just playing like natural flow basketball. I think a lot of Razorback fans were concerned that we weren't going to be able to close games off like we couldn't last year, but I think a big reason last year was rebounding, and if you look at the height on this team, I don't think that's going to be an issue as we've been out-rebounding or just about equally rebounding every team we've played. So I think this game is more attributed to just trying out new stuff against a lower opponent, so when we get into SEC play, we know it works. For Lipscomb, though, we got the W 86-50 there. Now, the Tulsa game was postponed due to COVID issues within Tulsa. I'm not sure if that's being made up or not, but as of right now, it's not, made up on the schedule. Maybe it'll be later. But anyway, we played Southern in a last-minute game, and we won that 79-44. And I know a lot of Razorback fans wanted to see us play an in-state school like UALR, but that really wasn't possible after you look at everything that was going on both teams. But I wish we could have got a better opponent, and I know COVID scheduling is tough. And we had a pretty good out-of-conference until COVID hit, so a lot of Razorback fans are upset at that, and that's not really true because obviously we don't want to have, deal with trying to get people across the nation and busing, people from like 5 states over. That just doesn't make sense during COVID. So I think going forward in next season in 2021, 2022, and so forth, we're going to have a pretty strong out-of-conference schedule. I just think this year took a hard hit after the Vegas tournament got postponed due to COVID. We're going to play Oklahoma, Louisville. Good schools in that. And it's just tough during COVID, to schedule teams last minute when it comes to money, buying games at home, things like that of similar nature. But against UCA, we got the dub 100-75. A little bit of a slow start in this game, but I think UCA plays a different type of ball that Arkansas really wasn't used to. Then we got things cooking, winning 100-75. Now, the starting 5 has become solidified. Obviously, 4 of these guys were on since day one, and then it's guard Moses Moody. He is averaging 16 points per game. He already has an SEC Freshman of the Week. I expect him to get a couple more, though. He's a really talented shooter, and his shots have been falling on point recently. 84% from the free throw line as well. Really like this kid. He's been a great shooter at high school, and I feel like at Monteverde Academy, he would have been like a top 25 prospect if he wasn't on such a highly touted team. He was just on a team with so much other talent that it's hard to get recognized sometimes. He's been insane for us. 5.7 rebounds a game from him, too. Justin Smith has been starting as well. 12.3 points per game with 5.5 rebounds. And I really like the work he does inside of, as a 4 or 5 guy, depending on who else is on the court. He's been really good dunking, finishing, missed shots, rebounding, and getting it up there. I really love his game, though. I feel like a lot of people weren't expecting this from him, but his game has been great for the Razorbacks. Connor Vanover is averaging 9.8 per game as he took over a forward starting spot from Vance Jackson, but he is the leading rebounder with 9 rebounds per game and 3.3 blocks per game. The leader for blocks is when you go, oh, why is he the leader? Well, he's 7'3". He just makes it easy for us. And he also shoots threes. I love watching him shoot threes because he just pulls up there, no one's expecting it, and the defender's just looking at him helplessly, and he just sinks one from deep. He's just a very talented ball player all around. Guard Jalen Tate averages the team with 4.7 assists per game, leader there, and then 10.5 points per game. He's a really good shooter nevertheless. What I really like from Jalen Tate is his ability to make plays. Obviously, he played a ton in the UCA game, which I started to really recognize that his style works really well with this team. The chemistry is there. He may not be a guy that, we're 100% relying on to make shots all the time, but he has that capability. He passes the ball really well. Great team player. I love what I see from him. And then guard Desi Sills, the returner from last year, 11.7 points per game with 2 steals per game. Pretty good defensive stuff from him, being the steal leader. But the sixth man is JD Note at 13.3 points per game out of the bench. And he's a really good three-point shooter. I mean, you look at some of the shots where he just gets blocked, picks up the ball, and sinks it from deep. Love his game. And I think all of these guys work really well together. And I know that, a lot of Razorback fans aren't happy with the schedule as it's been pretty weak. But I think there has to be an understanding of, obviously, the COVID situation. And this is a unexperienced team. Only one returning starter in Desi Sills. You look at Kentucky, he's bringing new guys across the lineup and roster. And then they're going to play Notre Dame, Georgia Tech, Richmond. And they're losing because that experience isn't there. I mean, there can be a case for whether you lose those games or win these games. I mean, sure, you can make those, but I feel more confident in this Razorback team, and I like our chances against Kentucky later this year. I'll talk SEC Power Rankings later, though. But the depth and height is on this team across the roster. Jalen Williams, Vance Jackson, Devontae Davis, and KK Robinson, all providing that for the Razorbacks. I love what all of these guys can do off the bench. Works so well as a team, all 10 of those guys. And the thing is, if you look at our issues from last year, I feel like the majority of them have been fixed. One of the biggest issues was getting out-rebounded by teams. We just couldn't rebound, and, Jimmy Witt could get 1 or 2, but then we got to a point where, we were just struggling to get a rebound, so the other team would just get it, put it up there, get points on the board. And free throwing was a little bit in questionable games, like we just weren't getting there. I like what I've seen from a lot of shooters this year on the line, like JD Note. Connor Vanover's been 100% from the line. Moody's been 84% for the line. He's been on the line a pretty good amount. But the thing I love about this team is the depth and the height. Depth is, the idea of how many guys can go into a starting game. And there's 10 legit guys. 6 of those are averaging above 10 points per game. Last year, I feel like when we got down in certain games, it was just, pray and hope that Joe or, Mason Jones can do something. And those guys went to the NBA for a reason. They're really good players. And I felt like it was like those guys were just bailing out the rest of the team along with Witt. But now we have like 10 guys, and 6 of them are averaging above 10 point periods a game. Vanover is 1 point from doing that. I just love the chemistry around this team and what they've been able to work with. It's just really fun to watch them play just because, they work so well together. And if you look at head coach Eric Musselman's Twitter, he talks about, the assist rate per game against UCA was in 66% and how they want 200 passes a game, which is actually developed from Steve Kerr and the Warriors. I just really love his interactions on Twitter with fans. I think that's awesome. Not many head coaches do that. I mean, if you tweet at him, he'll probably respond to you and, give you an answer to your question, or, he's just a really nice guy as well. I love his social media aspect because that brings in, a whole nother layer for recruiting and everything when I get to that later in the season. But he's been working with this team really well. Now, obviously, we have a little bit of a break for a while. We're going to run a little mini training camp. Obviously, we're not playing anybody this week, which is kind of contributed to finals and things like that. But we're not playing anybody, so we're going to run a little mini training camp for a while. And then we have Oral Roberts on Sunday, and then Abilene Christian on Tuesday. And don't sleep on this ACU team. They played a pretty competitive game against Texas Tech, who has a really good shooter in Mac McGlung. But do not sleep on this ACU team. They might give us some issues early on. But recaps and previews for basketball are coming back as football's kind of going away. I don't have to do as much for school. SEC play starts on December 30th versus Auburn. Looking forward to that one. And then January 2nd against probably a ranked Missouri team. Lots of stuff going forward here, so stay tuned for all that. Now, I always release my SEC Power Rankings on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook at All Hog Sports Pod. I'll have a graphic up within the next few days, but I figured I'd explain them on the pod while I'm talking basketball. SEC Men's Basketball Rankings, here they are. Number 1, I'm going to put Missouri. Really talented wins over a really good Oregon team who was a top 25 at the time in a neutral site in Omaha. Illinois at home, who was number 6 at the time, with a win over Duke. That Illinois team beat them. So many returning guys on this roster. I feel like Razorbacks have been playing these guys for like 2 or 3 years. Drew Smith, Kobe Brown. Really talented team. They've proven themselves with great wins. I got to put them at number 1. Tennessee, though, is a close second. They have a legit defense. Rick Barnes is a great coach, defensive guy. He coaches really well. And so does Mike White at Florida. Lots of raw talent on this team as well. I got the Arkansas Razorbacks at number 4. Eric Musselman, DM Porter. John Rothstein, that's his words right there. He tweets that after every single Razorback victory. He came up with those sayings on Twitter. And it's fair to say that after he brought in a whole new roster of guys, depth, talent. What's not there for this Razorback team? They fixed so many issues from their last season. Got to put them at number 4. 5, I'm going to take LSU. Obviously, Will Wade, off the court. Sure, there's issues there. I'm not even going to get into that. But he does a pretty good job on the court, and they arguably might have the talented roster in the LSU, especially when it gets clicking. And, they've been clicking pretty early, too. So, you have teams like Kentucky where they have a talented roster, but nothing's working together. LSU's a talented roster when they're working together, too. Bama at number 6. I feel like Nate Oates is going to have a really talented team come SEC time. Ole Miss at number 7 at 2-0. They're really high on Ken Palm's rankings as well. Number 8 is going to be Auburn. They had a big win against Memphis. I think this team arguably could be in the talks for 5, 4, 6 based off of Sharif Cooper's eligibility, but he does not have it right now. And also, Justin Powell is legit. He's going to be fighting Moses Moody for a lot of SEC Freshman of the Week awards. He already has one. Moody has one. Well, I think those guys are going to go head-to-head for who's going to get it. I'll put Kentucky at 9. Obviously, Boston is playing pretty good, but the team just doesn't play well together. They don't pass the ball around. They turn it over. Well, they do pass the ball around, but not enough. I feel like Coach Cal, though, is going to have these guys on the top half of the SEC by February or March. Georgia, I'm going to put at 5-0. I know that they're 5-0 and they got a couple votes in the AP Top 25, but that Samford game really concerned me about this squad, as they really could have lost that game easily. South Carolina at 11. Frank Martin's a really good coach, and I feel like they're also like Kentucky. They're going to be at the top later, but they had a pretty tough loss to Liberty. A&M at 12. They almost got beat by Tarleton. They had to come back to win this game. Not feeling too good about this team, in my opinion, and they were boat raced by TCU over the weekend. Mississippi State has had a lot of close games, but they just haven't been able to win all of them. 2 overtime loss to Dayton. Got a feeling it's going to be a long year in Starkville after losing Perry to the draft. And Vanderbilt at 14. I know they're 2-0, but this Vanderbilt team is just not that good. I'll be talking some women's basketball right after this. Now, Mike Neighbors is a fantastic coach, and I feel like he had a program-defining win against the defending national champions from the last women's basketball tournament. Number 4, Baylor Bears lost to this Razorback team. I really like what I see out of this team, but the wins for Mike Neighbors and this women's team, they won against Oral Roberts, Wake Forest, Florida Gulf Coast, ULM, Baylor obviously, SMU, and UCA. They're beating teams by a ton, by an average of 23 points. Really good stuff there, and it's got a pretty good, schedule playing SMU, Florida Gulf Coast at the Invitational, and they had a loss to Maryland. I feel like they'd be ranked a lot higher without that one, but the starting 5 for this team is fantastic. Taylor Thompson has been the rebounder for this team, averaging 7.3 rebounds per game as a leader there, 5 points per game, really able to crash that board and get the ball back to create plays. And the person who creates the plays is Michaela Daniels. 14 points per game, leading the team on assists per game as well. Just really talented for, a player to create assist for this team. Amber Ramirez, though, is extremely talented shooter. 13 points per game. And the leader in points per game on this team is Chelsea Dungy. 19 points per game. Really good play style. I don't think there's many better players around the SEC and we'll start to see that when we get into